Well-documented sea monster Maxine Waters is back in the news. Welcome to Doug in Exile. She actually had a death threat made on her here on YouTube. We're going to go into that article. Then we're going to go into a brief interview where she basically lies the entire time to a television network. Welcome to Doug in Exile. This is where the happy patriots are. Part of why we're happy is Maxine Waters' message is terrible. No one ever believes her. However, that does not mean violent threats are justified against her by this loopy YouTube guy. Here's San Antonio. There's the guy right there. This is the YouTuber. Man charged for targeting Hakeem Jeffries and Maxine Waters with terrorist threats. A man now facing arrest charges for allegedly making terrorist threats intended to incite public fear and influence government actions. According to court records, the man identified as 55-year-old Joseph Vilu allegedly posted a series of violent, racist, and threatening comments targeting multiple individuals, including U.S. Representatives Hakeem Jeffries and Maxine Waters on YouTube between May and June in 2025. Dude, never do that. That is a really bad idea, and I'm glad you got arrested for doing that. Okay. Detectives with the San Antonio Police Department and the Southwest Texas Fusion Center collaborated with Google, the FBI, and Capitol Police to trace the threats, which also referenced federal judges, protesters, and minority communities, and linked the threatening posts to Vilu through his registered account, his IP, Internet Protocol address, and physical address on the 8600 block of Timber Springs. So now we all know where it goes. Guys, you need to always keep your comments in the chat below. Be very careful. If you're ever creating material here on YouTube, never threaten violence on someone. That's just way out of line. The language used in the online comments included explicit threats of violence and hate speech promoting serious safety concerns. By the way, I'm not, hate speech, that can be defined away. Threats of violence, that cannot be defined away, okay? You need to go away for a long, and you're a nut. You need to go away for a long time, and you're a nut. An arrest affidavit was filed June 13th by Bexar County District Court, and Vilu now faces a third-degree felony charge for terrorist threats, causing public fear, and attempting to influence government operations. Now, it's true that there's a whole lot of Democrats that should also be arrested for their threats, including Kamala Harris. But okay, so here's Maxine Waters on the protests, which were also had plenty of terrorist threats and threats of violence intended to influence elections and influence politics. Here's Maxine Waters.
One of the cities in my district, they were dancing, they were having a good time, and the food was out. They were absolutely celebrating the fact that there was a proclamation that freed the slaves in 1865.
That's right. And, Juneteenth, one of those, talking about 2.5 years it took that message to get to Texas. I saw in Pacoima they marched 2.5 miles to commemorate that. It's a beautiful holiday.
Yes.
Yeah, it really is. And it's interesting to have that kind of joy, and we want that joy. But we do it against the context of some very interesting, unusual, and difficult times here in Southern California and in Los Angeles, especially with these ICE raids, these anti-ICE protests. You've been seeing it all. We've been seeing you doing it, too, trying to go into these federal buildings and getting turned away.
I was having my own joyful time with the ICE officers arresting people to be criminals to be deported. I was bringing out my own food truck, having my own party. So just like Maxine Waters had her celebration, we had ours.
Your response, first of all, what we've been seeing these last few weeks.
It is unusual in the way that it is occurring. The President of the United States started to send in the National Guard when there was no problem. And so
whatever she defines as there was no problem. So let me get this straight. LA is burning to the ground. They're burning electric vehicles. People are rioting, breaking property, doing smash and grab, throwing bricks and cinder blocks at agents from off the freeway, throwing liquids on them, spitting on them, and she did not see a problem. So Maxine Waters, now I'm looking at you and I see a problem.
What has happened is not only do we have the National Guard here, now we have the Marines here, and of course there are protests. Many of them are peaceful protests. I understand one of the protests in downtown Los Angeles got out of hand, and there was violence. And most of the protests are peaceful protests. As a matter of fact,
and you know what, Maxine? No one has a problem with those peaceful protests. Okay, if your protests are peaceful, you don't have to call in the National Guard and the Marines or the police or fire departments. No one has a problem with peaceful protests. So just ignore that 90% of them or 98% of them or 99% of them were peaceful. It's the ones when hundreds and hundreds of people are breaking glass, throwing bricks, and that is the difference. So don't try and hide behind this. Most of them were peaceful. No one has a problem with your peaceful protests.
This past Sunday or so, downtown LA.
You know what else was mostly peaceful? January 6th. January 6th. I have friends there that were old people and patriots going there and hanging out. Most people did not breach and go into the Capitol. So January 6th, mostly peaceful. In fact, mostly peaceful than the LA protests were.
There were 50,000 people. No incidents occurred. And so I know that people are worried about violence, but I do believe that the National Guard and the Marines that are being sent in, they're the ones have to be careful in the way that they approach their job.
You've been in LA since the 60s. You've seen these moments. You've seen it.
When he says since the 60s, he means since the 1860s.
Lots. You've seen it in 92. And I think just for people to understand your idea of protest and how that should look. I mean, if I'm not misspeaking and overstating your case, you say direct confrontational but peaceful. That's right? That's part of the message you want to give to people.
Well, peaceful. Absolutely. The Constitution guarantees the people of this country the right to have protests and the right to have freedom of speech. It's guaranteed in the Constitution. People get a little bit confused because they're oftentimes misled. Now, what you saw in Washington, D.C., when the Capitol was attacked, where the president was leading it, he calls it protest, but that was an insurrection. People died.
Oh, no. It was not an insurrection. Our courts looked at it. It was never officially called an insurrection. That's made up. This is a complete lie that she's doing on TV.
People were killed. We were hiding.
The only person killed was Ashley Babbitt, shot by a black security guard in the Capitol. And you know, if it was a white guard shooting a black woman named Ashley Babbitt, you'd be coming unglued right now.
Our desk. I mean, that's a riot. That's a bad thing. Right. And so there's a difference between peaceful protests and what you saw in Washington on January.
No, okay, you lied so much you just lost all your credibility, lady. You have to be able to say either both are peaceful because it was mostly peaceful, and you do not know the intent of every single person that was walking between those velvet ropes was trying to overthrow the country, which your own violent people, actually Antifa, they've called for overthrowing the country.
January 6th, led by the president.
Well, I'm thinking a little bit about some of the No Kings protests we saw this weekend, and I want to show the folks at home a little bit of you out there with the people. And It looks not just, I mean, this particular moment, I'm going to say at least, doesn't just look peaceful. It looks pretty joyous. And I want to ask you, as we show the folks at home, this little bit right here,
upside down
where do you get your energy? I mean, there's dancing and there's joy.
From demons, from about 14 demons inside of her, known as Legion.
there's a little bit of meeting the constituents along the way as you're making your point politically, too.
Oh, yes. I went to 3 different protests. I was not only in Hawthorne and over in Playa del Rey, but downtown Los Angeles. I went to 3 different ones.
Yeah.
And I had an opportunity to talk with a lot of young people who are out there who are worried about what's going to happen to them and their families. All they want is an opportunity, guaranteed by the Constitution, to make their case and to try and seek citizenship here.
Yeah.
But the president...
No. You don't have a guaranteed opportunity to seek citizenship. She's so wrong on these facts. However, I'm glad to give her a voice on this show. I'm glad to give her point of view, even if it's to prove how she has absolutely no standing for what she does. When she says that she only believes in peaceful protests and that LA riots were mostly peaceful, that means that January 6th trespassing were automatically mostly peaceful. No guns used. If you're going to try and insurrect the country in a country where everyone owns a handgun and not one gun was used, in that protest going to the Capitol? Not one. Terrible way to perform an insurrection. So this is insane that she would say that. Those people were not trying to perform an insurrection. If they did, they were probably the worst insurrection attempt in the history of the planet. Meanwhile, you have massive violence going out in LA riots. So if anything's an insurrection, if violence implies insurrection, doesn't have to just happen with weapons, but with cinder blocks being thrown at people, beatings, a burning of cars. She doesn't care. My whole point with all Democrats is anytime they pretend to care and do things for the children and they pretend like they love freedom, you don't love freedom. You don't love freedom of speech. You don't even love freedom of protest. You would take this country by violence if you could. Maxine Waters doesn't excuse any violent threat against you at all. I would protect you with my life and the Army's life and the police's life. You do not go after political opponents. Free speech is an incredible gift to a peaceful country. That's what I have to say to my happy patriots. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Doug in Exile.